Hello everyone, it is hopefully an OK Editor 357 here, and in today's video, I will be reviewing Angels of Death, a game where you try to survive, so you can die. Angels of Death is a horror adventure game created by Makto Sanada using RPG Maker, released for Microsoft Windows and Nintendo Switch, and it has since seen an anime, manga, and even light novel adaptations. This will be a spoiler-free review. That being said, there will be footage of the game up to episode 4, the final episode, but I will make sure that anything that could spoil the plot of Angels of Death will be blurred out. That being said, let's start the review with the plot summary. Rachel Gardner, a 13-year-old girl, wakes up in a mysteriously abandoned hospital. What she remembers is she was taken to the hospital after the murder of her parents, but as to how she wound up in this particular situation, she has no recollection. After wandering around the hospital floor, she is almost killed by a deranged serial killer who we will come to know as Zack. After a certain something happens involving the two of them that I won't say even though it's within the first hour of the game, Rachel remembers something. Oh boy, she wants to die. Hate it when I wake up and forget I want to die. However, it's very important to her that she doesn't kill herself, as she sees that as a sin unforgivable by God. Zack wants to escape the bizarre hospital they're in, which I feel like I should mention now has a serial killer, each with their own unique brand of crazy on each floor. But the problem for Zack is he's not that smart. So they make a deal. Rachel helps Zack escape, and in turn, when they get out, Zack promises to kill Rachel. And there's the story of Angels of Death. You have 4 episodes, each where you visit a different floor and face off against the owner of said floor, and progress throughout the hospital in an attempt to escape. Episodes 3 and 4 do mix up the format a bit, as they start to focus heavily on the overarching narrative and character development, but the truth of the matter is you'll be visiting 4 different floors at least throughout the story. So, with the game's episodic format changing locations and opponents constantly, the 2 constants in the story, Rachel and Zack, our main characters, have to be engaging enough to make me want to keep playing and see the story unfold. And thankfully they are, but I have some minor gripes with Zack's character. I do like Zack, especially when we learn more about his past and how he became who he is today, but I swear every other line coming out of his mouth is a swear, but it just feels so forced and unnecessary, like the creator was trying too hard to make him feel edgy or crazy. For the record, Zack is 20 years old, but the way he makes it a point that every other thing he says has some sort of profanity in it just gets old fast. It felt like a kid who just learned swear words and wanted to seem cool or rebellious even by saying them a lot. And that may have even been what the creator was going for, but it still just got old and seemed forced to me. I have no problem with swearing in the video games I'm playing, but there were probably 2, maybe 3 times when he said something where I either chuckled because it was actually funny, or I was like, yeah, that makes sense. That's something a person would say, or that's something a person who is also a crazy serial killer would say. Another thing about Zack's dialogue is that aside from the constant cursing, he's always just saying random, edgy, or violent things to remind Rachel and the players that he is indeed a serial killer that has killed people. However, at least that relates to who he is as a character, so I don't mind it as much. Rachel, I feel, was handled with much more care. When she first wakes up in the hospital, she seems like a normal 13-year-old girl, albeit traumatized from the death of her parents, but still normal. However, after that thing happens involving Zack and she remembers her desire to die, she takes on this lifeless, almost doll-like expression all the time and only shows the most basic of emotions or reactions. It makes the player curious, what made her this way? What happened to her that traumatized this girl so badly that she doesn't want to live and that makes her seem so lifeless in the way she acts? And why does she want so desperately for Zack specifically to kill her? The time she gets worked up most in the story is only when she faces obstacles that get in her and Zack's way of escaping the hospital, which basically is just when she can finally die. As the story progresses, starting especially in episode 3, we learn more about Rachel's character and thought process, giving us just a glimpse of how or why she became the way she is, and then in episode 4, when we find out the past of Rachel, hoo boy. It all comes together wonderfully in a tragic story that'll make you sympathize with Rachel and give an explanation that makes sense as to how she became the broken, lifeless person that she is now. And it even explains why she doesn't consider suicide a valid option. It's a terrifying portrayal of what tragedy can do to someone so young. Rachel and Zack are both the main characters of Angel of Death, but I do feel like Rachel is the character with more character development and care put into her, and she does feel like the center of the story. Now, where Zack really shines, and I have more good things to say about Rachel, is in their interactions with each other. The chemistry between the two of them is the best part of this story, hands down. It's so fun and engaging to watch. You have 2 people who are polar opposites, a crazy serial killer who spends most of his time yelling insane, violent stuff, and then you have a quiet, lifeless girl who calmly approaches each new situation they find themselves in with care. What do you get when you put these 2 together? A dark comedy show that eventually transforms into something much different but equally as engaging, just for different reasons. But I have to say, their time together in episodes 1 and 2 before any heavy character development happens on Rachel's part is my favorite time with them. Zack loves to kill people, but he doesn't like killing emotionless people like Rachel. He sees no satisfaction in that. He wants to see their fear, desperation, struggle for life as they die. And then you have Rachel, who is emotionless and just wants to die, which annoys him. So he's constantly trying to freak Rachel out or threaten her by being over the top, but she never reacts, which further frustrates him, and it even ends up freaking him out at times, which is the exact opposite of what he was trying to do. He can't even threaten her by saying, "Hurry up or I'll kill you," because then she'll just be like, "That's what I want," and then he'll just get annoyed again. They have such a unique and fun to watch dynamic, and it's definitely the highlight of the story for me. Eventually, their relationship and dynamic does start to transform into something very different as Rachel grows as a character and we learn more about her, but throughout most of the story, they still have these fun interactions, which I appreciate. So, the focus or meat of the story to Angels of Death is 100% the relationship between Zack and Rachel, and how it changes over time as the characters, and by that I mean mostly Rachel, change. But what about the rest of the story? The different owners of each four are interesting and fun to watch, but two of them just feel like they're in the game to pad out the story's time. I think it would have been nice to see the backstory of these characters, so we can see how they became the bizarre and quirky serial killers that we encounter. I'm not saying we would have to spend a lot of time on it, even just a quick flashback or monologue by them would do the trick, but as they are in the story, they're just crazy people that are in Rachel and Zack's way. And in a story-heavy game like this one, I feel more is needed. Now, there is actually a separate bonus episode that explains the past of the first main floor owner you encounter, Eddie. This wasn't part of the original game. It was a bonus disc included with one of the Angels of Death anime Blu-rays released, and it has since seen a separate English release on Steam. And I think that's really cool. It's $7, which I feel is a little expensive for what appears to be a game that clocks in at about 2 hours or so, but the fact that this was originally a bonus that came with the Blu-ray of the anime adaptation probably has something to do with that. But if you enjoyed Angels of Death as much as I did, it's worth the money, especially since it helps support the creator. I really hope the creator makes one for the second floor owner you encounter, because I would love to see how she turned into the crazy, showmanship-obsessed killer that Zack and Rachel fight. I haven't played it yet, I have just finished Angels of Death myself, but I am going to very soon. I just felt like I should mention that since it relates to my complaint of the floor owners not having backstories. All that being said about the bonus episode, it wasn't part of the original story, it was a bonus story made later on in the series, and not part of the base story you get to experience when you buy Angels of Death. So I'm still gonna hold the lack of backstory of the floor owners against the story. As for the rest of the story, I feel like the drama between Rachel and Zack in episode 2 was a little forced, and at times I don't think it made sense. Episode 3 absolutely nails the atmosphere that it was going for. The first 15 or so minutes had me genuinely frightened as I was exploring the floor layout. The rest of the story contained in episode 3 was very well done and really started the character development of Rachel and her relationship with Zack, as well as starting to show the players a glimpse of what the endgame of the story could entail. I also just love the floor owner in the third episode, the Reverend. His design is so cool, and I like how he challenges Rachel emotionally, which is when we, the players, really get the chance to learn more about her. Also, there is an explanation for what the abandoned hospital is and how or why it came to be, and it's definitely an explanation that exists and is in the story. I don't know. I genuinely believe the focus of the story is Rachel and her relationship with Zack, and the abandoned hospital with different floor owners is more just the means to put them in situations where they have to grow as characters and confront their pasts. The setting itself, minus a minor thing that happens that contributes to one aspect of Rachel's character, really doesn't feel that involved with the focus of the story, if that makes sense. Like, I could change where the thing about Rachel's character happens to anywhere, and it would still feel the same. So when they do give an explanation for who made this place the way it is and why, it's not a bad explanation, but it feels almost unnecessary. Like, it felt like the creator never really wanted to focus on the explanation for the abandoned hospital, but he threw one together just to have one, and the explanation just feels a little out of place. Towards the end of the story, there's an offhand remark that vaguely explains some of the details surrounding the hospital, and it's meant to add on to what we already know. But I almost feel like that one tidbit towards the end would be just enough on its own for people to be like, oh, so that's why the place is the way it is, and just call it a day. I don't think an explanation, or at least an in-depth one, is needed for the setting unless it directly involves one of or both of the main characters in some way, which it doesn't. So what we get is an explanation that feels almost random, and it's kind of brought back with some dialogue towards the end of episode 4, but it still feels out of place within the focus of the story. I won't knock the story for it, but I do wish it was handled differently. either by keeping the explanation vague or non-existent, or by making it relate more directly to the story of Zack and Rachel. Episode 4 was great. It's mostly focused on diving into Rachel's past and bringing her character development to a close through deadly and emotional trials. As for the ending, I have heard people complain about it, but I personally liked the ending. It leaves things uncertain, but in a way that I can picture exactly in my head how the story finishes beyond what we see in the game. The way I worded that may make it sound like a cliffhanger ending, but it's not. It is a conclusion to the story Makto Sanada had written, and in my opinion, it feels like a great way to end the story. Interestingly enough, there's also a couple different ways it could be interpreted. I actually thought the ending was pretty clear-cut after reading it, but after some looking around online, I found an interesting alternate way it can be seen. And using this interpretation, it might even fix some of the problems people have with the ending. I'm personally sticking to how I first thought of the ending, since the problems people had with it never bothered me too much personally. I can't find anywhere online that has the creator comment on the ending, so the ending is what you wish to make of it. Either that or there is an answer that Makto Sanada has that just hasn't been officially made public yet, which basically means the same thing at the end of the day. You can interpret it how you want. If I'm wrong about the ending and there is an official statement somewhere about what happens in the ending, anyone watching, please comment down below and let me know. But my overall thoughts on the story? I think it's definitely flawed in some regards, but the good more than outweighs the bad to give players a unique and engaging story to experience. And like I said before, the chemistry between the characters of Rachel and Zack is enough of a reason alone to play Angels of Death. So how's the gameplay? It's a standard RPG Maker game. You walk around or run in your environment, click on things to either grab them or interact with them, and progress the story either by clicking on more things or walking some more. Nothing game-changing here, and that's fine. The focus of Angels of Death is definitely the story. There are a few puzzles, but they're pretty easy to solve. If you're looking for a game with challenging puzzles that make you really use your brain, this isn't it. Which was good for me because I'm dumb like Zack, and I even had to look up a walkthrough for one of the first rooms which only had like 3 things to click on to progress the story. The game is technically a horror game, but there weren't a lot of moments I was scared. There were definitely a few moments in the game where I was disturbed and shocked by what I was seeing, and those moments were really well done. But there were maybe 1 or 2 times aside from those moments that something unexpected happened that did scare me and catch me off guard. But aside from episode 3's beginning with its great atmosphere, most of the times I was scared was more me being tense due to having a time limit on something. There are a few moments in this game where you will have to run away from something or someone, and the process of getting away from this said thing can be really stressful. Whether it's just running away in a certain direction and trying to make sure you don't run into the current threat to your safety, finding a hiding place, or figuring out a way to get out of a room before it's set on fire or filled with poisonous gas, these are the moments that got my blood pumping the most. And there were a couple occasions during these moments when the threat would catch up to me and kill me, and the suddenness of it did actually make me jump. Also, a minor complaint with some of these moments is I feel like what you're supposed to do or which way you're supposed to run can be a little vague, especially in one section in episode 2 where you have to run away from someone and I couldn't figure out where I was supposed to go, and I died an annoying amount of times before I found the entrance to the next room. It was never marked with a door sprite, or the character never gave any indication of which way I should go, so there was at least a solid 10 minutes of me running away from someone only for said person to keep catching up and killing me, which got on my nerves quick. I don't know if that instance was just me being dumb or bad design on the game's part, so I figured I'd mention it. If anyone watching this has had the same problem, please comment down below so I can feel better about myself. The artwork in this game is really good for an RPG Maker game. The various floors throughout the game have just enough personality to fit each of the floor owners and offer up a good amount of variety in location, so I never felt like I was just visiting the same area a second time, aside from the times where the story would actually have you backtrack to previous floors for a reason. The character sprites look just like pixelated versions of their drawn artwork, and I like how the game uses the movement of character sprites to show the emotions or thought process of the characters. Like if a character is trying to think of where the exit to a room is, their character sprite will pace back and forth to show their thinking process of said character, and that they're racking their brain for a solution. Other things like that, various physical movements of the character sprites to display emotions for the characters without always having to rely on the drawn character portraits. I never felt like I was watching a static image of a character model for too long. The drawn artwork for each of the characters are very unique designs that perfectly fit the personality of the mostly insane cast of characters. The designs look kind of over the top, which fits the over the top and eccentric nature of most of the cast really well. The more sane characters have just as good character designs that match their personality and contribute to the atmosphere of the story. And like I said before, I just love the Reverend's design so much. There's also drawings of particularly important events that are placed throughout the story and also during the end credits for each episode. And while they're basically sketches, the addition addition of them is nice. It gives some bonus visualization to scenes that were already great on their own, and it's fun to see at the end of the episodes the various artwork for moments throughout the story giving even more life to the world of Angels of Death. Moving on to the soundtrack, it does a great job of adding to the atmosphere of the story. For some scenes of exploration, you'll get these subtle but spooky background tracks that make you feel like you're trekking through a haunted house. Then for some of the more action-oriented scenes, you'll get a track that starts ramping up with excitement. And towards the later parts of the story, slower and more emotion-inducing tracks come into play for moments that are important for Rachel and Zach. The music for both the starting menu and credits for each episode is really good and gets you ready for the story of Angels of Death. I apologize. I know I'm not the best at describing music, or really artwork for that matter, but in short, this game has a decent variety of music that fits the different emotional beats of the story and can really add to the atmosphere of Angels of Death to give a very fulfilling experience as you play the game. The sound design is good for a lot of the game, but one complaint I have is that I feel like they use one or two particular creepy laughing sound effects way too much. It got repetitive fast. But aside from that, the sound design does a good job of adding tension when you're exploring by having a far-off sound make you wonder what lies ahead for you, or in other cases, what's coming after you. I had a great time playing Angels of Death. Aside from some complaints with the story, this game gave me an interesting and fun to watch set of main characters and let me explore an abandoned hospital and face off against equally as entertaining killers and foes, each with their own unique way of being crazy. The story Makto Sanada weaves throughout the 4 main episodes, while flawed, was unique and, with the characters who got proper focus, gave me enough emotional satisfaction to keep me thinking about the story to some extent for a while. If any of that sounds interesting to you, I would say Angels of Death is definitely worth your time, and I rate it a 7 out of 10. I'm looking forward to playing Episode Eddie in the future to give me a little backstory on our first main floor owner enemy, and I also plan on watching the anime adaptation. I'm curious to see how the story of Angels of Death, whose charm I feel lies a decent amount in progressing through the story yourself, translates and looks in full-fledged animation, and to see if they add, change, or remove anything. But even when adaptations are bad, I typically enjoy them to some extent because, if nothing else, I get to see my favorite scenes animated, unless they were cut, so I'm sure I'll enjoy the anime to some extent. I know this game isn't a visual novel, but I'll still do my Who is Best Girl segment that I plan to for most of my future reviews, visual novel or otherwise. And the best girl of Angels of Death is Catherine Cathy Ward, the owner of the floor you explore in episode 2. I like her crazy showmanship. She constantly wants to make a spectacle out of what she does to people, which is mostly killing. And while I do feel like the character drama between Zach and Rachel was forced in episode 2, I still felt Cathy's floor and style led to some interesting obstacles for the characters to push through and gave us some cool set pieces. Well everyone, I hope you enjoyed this review. For anyone who has played the game, what did you think of it? Do you agree with my score? And tell me in the comments what you thought of the ending. As for anyone who has never heard of the game or was maybe thinking about getting it, I hope I did an adequate job of reviewing it and maybe even convincing you to get it. Well, that's it for this video. This has been hopefully an okay editor 357 here. Thank you everyone for watching and see you guys next time.